I never thought I'd be standing in my front yard, half awake and wrapped in nothing but a flimsy white robe, looking like a half-baked ghost, while my neighbor, who I barely even knew, got the first real look at me. And yet, there I was, shivering more from embarrassment than the chilly morning air. It all started around 7 a.m., which for me is basically the middle of the night. I'd just taken a shower, tossed on that robe because I was planning on grabbing a quick breakfast from my fridge before jumping into work-from-home mode. Somehow, in my morning haze, I locked the front door behind me and didn't realize it until I tried to get back inside. The key was on the kitchen counter, laughing at me from the other side of the glass. Now, I'm not exactly what you call a morning person. My brain operates on a pretty slow startup, and when it's that early, I'm more likely to trip over my own feet than think straight. So I stood there for a solid minute debating my options, one of which, I admit, was to holler out to the neighbors for help. That's when I noticed movement from the house next door. I live in this quiet little neighborhood where everyone knows each other by sight, if not by name. My neighbor's place is the one immediately to the left, an old brick townhouse that somehow got this weirdly modern interior visible through the windows. The guy who lives there is Sam, I think. Yeah, Sam. We'd exchanged a couple of awkward hellos in passing, mostly through shared nods and the occasional "how's it going" when taking out the trash. Sam's probably in his late 20s, early 30s, tall, with this unruly mop of brown hair, and always wearing these beaten-up sneakers like he's just come from some indie concert or art gallery opening. He's the kind of guy you notice, even if you don't want to admit it. Anyway, this morning, Sam was just stepping out his front door, coffee in hand, wearing those same sneakers and some casual jeans. And then he saw me. Robe. Barefoot. Key nowhere in reach. A walking disaster. For a moment, neither of us said a word. I think he was as surprised as I was. I mean, I'm guessing he never expects to see his neighbor locked out in his robe at 7 a.m. The look on his face was a mix of amusement and something else. I'm not sure what exactly, but it caught me off guard. Maybe it was kindness? Or maybe just the sheer disbelief of the situation. I could feel my face flush bright red, and I was about to mumble some lame excuse when Sam just laughed, this warm, genuine laugh that made the whole embarrassing moment feel a little less like a disaster. Then he just said, "Need some help, man?" And that's when the day went from, "Please don't let anyone see this," to something I didn't expect at all. I blinked a few times, still caught off guard. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual but probably failing miserably. Locked myself out. Classic me. Sam took a step closer, still holding his coffee like it was a lifeline in this awkward morning moment. Gotta say, not the usual way to make an impression. But hey, at least you're rocking the robe look. I snorted, which helped break the tension a little. Yeah, well, it's not really my fashion statement. More like a temporary uniform for idiots. He grinned, those bright eyes crinkling at the corners. Temporary uniform for idiots. That's a good one. I might borrow that. I felt a strange warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the chilly air. It was weird, right? To feel kind of excited about your neighbor seeing you in your most vulnerable and ridiculous state. Yeah, I was weird, but I couldn't help it. Sam glanced down at the door of my place, then back at me. Got a spare key? Sadly, no. I'm not that prepared, I admitted. I usually leave it under the mat or something. But I just cleaned the porch yesterday. I pointed vaguely, hoping he'd understand that I wasn't just making excuses. He laughed again, shaking his head. Well, that's just asking for trouble. I shrugged. Apparently. Sam took a sip of his coffee and looked thoughtful. Then he said, "Give me a sec, I think I have something that can help." Without waiting for me to respond, he turned back toward his house and disappeared inside. I stood there, robe billowing a bit in the breeze, wondering what the hell I'd gotten myself into. The last thing I'd expected was for Sam to come to my rescue, let alone to feel this weird flutter in my chest when he smiled at me. A few moments later, he reappeared, holding this little metal tool that looked like it belonged in a locksmith's toolkit. Or maybe a magician's kit, I wasn't sure. "Found my spare lockpick thingy," he said with a wink. "I've dabbled." I raised an eyebrow. Dabbled? Long story, he said, kneeling down next to the door. Let's just say I'm good at getting into places without breaking anything. Watching him work was oddly mesmerizing. There was this careful focus in his eyes as his fingers moved with surprising skill, and I found myself forgetting about how ridiculous I looked standing there in a robe. Within a minute or two, the lock clicked, and the door swung open. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. See? Easy, Sam said, standing up and brushing his hands off like a pro. I couldn't help but smile. Thanks, man. Seriously. You just saved me from what would have been an extremely awkward morning. No problem, he said, glancing me over again, as if noticing the robe one more time. So what's the plan now? You heading back inside to, I don't know, put on some pants? I laughed. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. After this, I'm making coffee and maybe actually eating breakfast for once. Sam nodded. If you want, I'm about to head to that little cafe down the street. They've got great croissants. I hesitated, surprised by how much I wanted to say yes. That sounds nice. Cool. I can walk you in, so you're not standing around in a robe again. His grin was infectious, and suddenly, the thought of grabbing coffee with him didn't seem awkward at all. All right, I said, still trying to believe I was actually agreeing to this. We walked inside together, the door shutting behind me with a satisfying click. I threw the robe over a chair, feeling a little less exposed, and grabbed some clothes. Sam hung around, flicking through some music on his phone while I got dressed. When I finally came back out, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, he gave me a thumbs up. You're a lot less terrifying in clothes, he joked. I rolled my eyes. Thanks, I think. We stepped outside again, and the morning sun had finally started to warm things up. The street was quiet, just the occasional car passing by and a few birds chirping overhead. For some reason, the world felt a little brighter. As we walked toward the cafe, conversation flowed more easily than I expected. We talked about music, the weird quirks of our neighborhood, the best pizza spots in town. Nothing heavy, just that easy back and forth that feels natural when you're comfortable with someone. At one point, Sam glanced over at me and said, You know, I never pegged you as the guy who'd lock himself out in his robe. Yeah, well, I shrugged, there's a lot you don't know about me. He smiled, and for a split second, I thought maybe he wanted to know more. The idea both excited and terrified me. When we reached the cafe, I caught myself stealing another look at him. Maybe it was the way the sunlight caught the strands of his hair, or how his eyes lit up when he talked about the band playing there next weekend. Maybe it was just that he'd been the first person to see me at my absolute worst, and somehow that made him feel more real to me. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I knew one thing. Getting locked out in my robe had turned out to be the best accident of my week. And maybe, just maybe, something more was about to start. The cafe had that cozy, slightly hipster vibe, exposed brick walls, the smell of fresh espresso hanging in the air, soft indie music playing low in the background. I liked it instantly. Sam obviously came here often. The barista greeted him by name, and he had that easy, casual way of ordering that made me think he was a regular. I was grateful to be tagging along. We found a corner table by the window. As I settled in, I realized this felt different from any neighborly small talk I'd had before. There was a sort of calm ease between us, like the kind of quiet that fills up spaces when you don't have to impress anyone. So, Sam said, leaning back with his croissant and a black coffee, "Tell me something I wouldn't guess about you." I laughed. Good one. Let me think. I'm terrible at parallel parking. Like, dangerously bad. He raised an eyebrow. Dangerously bad? That sounds like a story. Yeah. I once backed into a mailbox and didn't notice until the next day when some neighbor left a passive-aggressive note. Smooth, right? Sam grinned, shaking his head. Dude, you're a walking sitcom. I caught myself smiling more than I thought I would. What about you? What's your secret? He looked at me for a moment, as if debating whether to spill or not. Okay, confession time. I'm terrible at small talk, which is ironic, because I work in marketing. Seriously, you're pulling my leg. Nope, I fake it pretty well, but I'd rather just skip to the part where people talk about real stuff. I nodded, understanding that completely. Same here. Small talk feels exhausting. He looked more relaxed now, like he was letting his guard down. So we're already skipping to the real stuff? I shrugged, feeling a little bolder. Why not? The conversation drifted after that, less guarded, more genuine. Sam told me about his job, the ups and downs, how he'd recently started taking guitar lessons again after years of neglecting his old band. I shared bits of my work-from-home routine, the headaches of Zoom calls, and my borderline obsession with cheesy 80s movies. At some point, I realized my coffee cup was empty, but I hadn't even noticed. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the Robe incident or the locked door anymore. There was something about Sam, something that pulled me in. You know, for a guy who's good with lockpicks, I said, you're surprisingly easy to open up to. He laughed, a little quieter this time. That might be the best compliment I've gotten all week. We talked until the cafe started to fill up with a late morning crowd. It felt like time had stretched, but also passed too quickly. When we finally stepped outside, the sun was higher, warming the street and making the world look less gray than it had that early morning. So I said, "What now? Back to work? Or are you planning on picking any more locks today?" Sam shrugged with a smile. "I'm free for the afternoon. How about you?" I hesitated. Honestly, the day just got a lot better. I'd rather not go back to staring at a computer screen. He looked at me like he was thinking something over. There's a park a few blocks from here, great for people watching, and I'm pretty sure they have a food truck with amazing tacos. Want to check it out? I was surprised by how quickly my answer came. Yeah, I'd like that. We started walking together, side by side, the awkwardness from earlier completely gone. As we strolled, the city's sounds wrapped around us. The distant rumble of traffic, kids laughing somewhere nearby, the occasional bark of a dog. The world felt alive and full of possibility. At the park, we found a bench under a big oak tree. The food truck wasn't disappointing. Tacos stacked high with toppings I couldn't even name but loved anyway. We shared bites, laughing when we accidentally dropped bits on our shirts or missed our mouths. Sam told me about his favorite bands, the trips he wanted to take, and the one time he tried surfing and ended up face-planting into the water. I told him about my childhood dog, the one who used to chase squirrels like it was his life's mission, and the time I got lost in a city I'd lived in for years. There was this easy rhythm to our conversation, punctuated by comfortable silences, where we just watched the world go by. At one point, I noticed Sam watching me more than he was watching anything else, and I felt my heart skip. "Hey," he said softly, "I'm really glad you got locked out this morning." I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah? Me too." We smiled at each other, and for a brief moment, it felt like something unspoken passed between us, an understanding, a spark, something new and tentative. As the afternoon light softened, I realized that getting locked out in a robe might have been the worst thing to happen that morning, but it also led me to this unexpected connection that felt like it could turn into something worth holding on to. I didn't know where it was going yet. Hell, I didn't even know if Sam felt the same way. But for the first time in a long while, I was excited to find out. After we finished the tacos, I suggested we keep walking a bit, not quite ready to let the day end so soon. We wandered through the park, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows and giving everything this golden hue. There's something about those quiet moments with someone new that feels both exhilarating and terrifying, like stepping off a cliff, hoping the ground will catch you. I found myself stealing glances at Sam, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, or how his hands moved when he talked about stuff he cared about. There was this authentic energy about him that made me feel less self-conscious than I usually do around new people. "So," Sam said, suddenly breaking the comfortable silence, "what's the weirdest thing about you that I haven't uncovered yet?" I thought about that. Weirdest, huh? I guess I'm a complete nerd when it comes to old video games. Like, I own an original Game Boy and everything. He chuckled. "That's awesome. I'm more of a vinyl collector myself. There's just something about the crackle before a song starts that digital can't beat." We talked about our little quirks for a while, laughing at how different our nerdy passions were, but somehow fitting together like puzzle pieces. I don't know if it was the way he made me feel seen or the fact that I was actually opening up without feeling judged, but I was genuinely happy. At some point, the sky started darkening, and the cool breeze nudged me back to reality. I should probably head back, I said reluctantly. Yeah, me too, Sam agreed. But before we go, would you want to do this again sometime? Without the robe incident as a pretext, I laughed. Definitely. Although I can't promise I won't lock myself out again. He smiled and his eyes held that same warmth from earlier. Well, next time, I'll make sure to be your first responder. We exchanged numbers right there on the park bench, fingers brushing slightly when I handed him my phone, and I swear my heart did a little happy dance. It's silly how those small moments can feel huge when you're falling for someone new. When we finally parted ways, I felt light but also a little nervous. I kept replaying the day in my mind, how it started with me looking like a total mess and somehow ended with me hoping for something more. The next few days were this strange mix of anticipation and normal routine. I caught myself checking my phone more often than usual, waiting for a text from Sam. When his message popped up, it was casual but warm, like we'd already passed some invisible threshold from neighbors to something else. One evening, he invited me over to watch a movie. I accepted, without hesitation, nervous but excited. When I got to his place, he greeted me with a smile and no trace of the awkwardness from before. Just easy, natural warmth. We spent the night on his couch, the movie playing low in the background, while we talked about everything and nothing. At one point, our legs bumped, and I felt this electric jolt shoot through me. I looked over, and he caught my gaze, his eyes soft and inviting. I'm not gonna lie, that moment felt like the start of something big, something I didn't want to mess up. We didn't rush anything. No grand declarations or movie-style kisses, just a slow, steady, growing closeness that felt right. I realized I was falling for him, not just for the guy who helped me out in a ridiculous situation, but for the person he was when no one else was watching. Looking back, getting locked out in my robe was embarrassing as hell, but it also cracked open a door, literally and figuratively, that led me to someone who might just be the person I've been waiting for. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes. After that first movie night, things started to settle into this weirdly comfortable rhythm between Sam and me. We'd text every day, sometimes just dumb memes or song recommendations, but other times sharing little thoughts or venting about work. I was surprised how easily it all flowed, and honestly, I was starting to think maybe I was falling into something I hadn't expected to find so close to home. One Saturday, Sam invited me over for brunch. I showed up a little early, and when the door swung open, he was already in the kitchen, apron on, whisking something in a bowl with this focused intensity that made me smile. He looked up when I came in, and his face lit up like he'd been waiting for me. "Hey, you're here," he said, setting the bowl down and wiping his hands on the apron. "Hope you're hungry. I'm trying my hand at pancakes today," I laughed, stepping inside. "Perfect. I have a feeling you're going to nail it." We moved through the small kitchen together, bumping shoulders and exchanging easy jokes as he flipped pancakes while I brewed coffee. There was something really nice about being there, not as neighbors or acquaintances, but as something closer. It felt like a little world that was ours, even if it was just for a few hours. After breakfast, we sat on his couch, lazily scrolling through our phones but sneaking glances at each other like teenagers with a secret. At one point, Sam put his phone down and turned toward me. So, he started, a little hesitant. "What do you want from this?" I mean, us? I felt my heart skip. It was the question I'd been dreading and hoping for all at once. I took a deep breath. Honestly, I don't know exactly. I'm not great at labels or rushing things, but I do know I want to see where this goes. "With you," he smiled, relief flashing in his eyes. "Same here. No pressure, just whatever feels right." That moment, the honesty, the vulnerability, was kind of amazing. It felt like stepping off that cliff together, knowing someone had your back. Over the next few weeks, we kept building on that foundation. Dates were spontaneous, a walk to the bookstore, grabbing ice cream, or just hanging out watching dumb YouTube videos. But the best moments were the quiet ones, sitting in his living room with our legs tangled up, sharing music playlists or cooking dinner together and trying not to burn the kitchen down. One night, after a particularly hilarious attempt at making homemade sushi, I ate more rice than anything else. We were sprawled on the couch, the apartment smelling faintly of soy sauce and seaweed. Sam looked over at me, this soft, thoughtful expression on his face. He said, "I'm really glad you got locked out that morning." I grinned, nudging him playfully. "You say that like it was fate or something." "Maybe it was," he said, his voice low. "It's crazy how something so embarrassing brought me to you." I leaned in a little closer, feeling the warmth of him beside me. "Yeah, who knew being a total klutz could be a good thing?" He chuckled, and then, without thinking too much about it, I reached out and took his hand. His fingers were warm and fit perfectly with mine, like they'd been waiting there for the moment. Neither of us said anything for a while. Sometimes, the quiet speaks louder than words. As the weeks turned into a couple of months, I realized this wasn't some fling or casual thing. Sam and I were becoming a team, a weird, imperfect, hilarious team. And honestly, I hadn't felt this comfortable or this alive in a long time. One evening, we were sitting on his balcony, the city lights sparkling below us. The air was cool, and I had my arm draped over his shoulder. "Do you ever think about the future?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, eyes reflecting the soft glow from the street lamps. "Sometimes. But mostly, I try to focus on right now. Because right now feels pretty damn good." I smiled and rested my head against his. "Yeah, right now is pretty great. I don't know what's coming next for us, and maybe that's the best part. Because no matter what, I've got Sam, my neighbor, my rescue, my unexpected everything, and that's more than I ever thought I'd find just by stepping outside in a robe one embarrassing morning. There's this funny thing about getting comfortable with someone. It sneaks up on you. One minute you're cautiously feeling things out, and the next, you're finding yourself sharing the weirdest, most personal stuff without even thinking about it. That's how it felt with Sam. One rainy Thursday evening, I was supposed to be working late, but Sam texted me around 6 p.m. with a simple, "Come over? I've got wine and a fire going." I wasn't about to say no, so I grabbed my jacket, locked the door behind me, this time making sure I had my keys, and headed over. When I got to his apartment, the place smelled like cinnamon and pine. He'd obviously put some kind of scented candle on. The fire in the fireplace cast a warm, flickering glow across the room, making everything feel cozy and inviting. Sam was already curled up on the couch with a glass of red wine, and as soon as he saw me, he grinned like I was the only person in the world. "Perfect timing," he said, patting the seat next to him. I sank in next to him, feeling the heat from the fire and something warmer from sitting this close. We talked about our days, but eventually the conversation slipped into something quieter and more serious. Sam's fingers traced lazy circles on the back of my hand, and I realized how much I craved that softness. "I want to ask you something," he said, voice low enough that I had to lean in just to catch it. "Shoot," I said, already feeling the pull of whatever was coming. "Have you ever been afraid," he started, "of really letting someone in? Like, all the way?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think everyone's scared of that in some way. It's scary to be vulnerable." He looked at me with this mixture of understanding and something I couldn't quite place. Hope? Maybe? I'm scared too. But I feel like with you it's different. Like maybe I want to try. That hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed, feeling this strange tall tale of nervousness and something like hope. "I want that too," I said honestly. Scary or not, we didn't say much after that, just sat there holding hands, wrapped up in the quiet warmth between us. I realized that moment, this vulnerability, this trust, was a turning point. It wasn't just about the jokes or the tacos or even the Robe incident anymore. It was about building something real. The days after that felt charged with a new energy. We were more entwined in each other's lives, introducing each other to favorite books, cooking meals together that didn't involve any disasters, and sharing playlists that somehow told stories about us. We started taking little weekend trips to nearby towns, wandering through antique shops or hiking trails, laughing at our mismatched pace and Sam's terrible sense of direction. One Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves at a quiet beach just outside the city. The sky was overcast, but the air was warm and salty. We kicked off our shoes and walked along the shore, letting the waves lap at our feet. Without thinking, I reached for Sam's hand. He squeezed mine and smiled that slow, easy smile that made my heart feel like it was both melting and racing. Sometimes, I said, I still can't believe how this all started. He looked over at me, eyebrows raised. Locked out in a robe? Yeah, it's a pretty epic meet-cute. I laughed. Most people would probably be mortified if their neighbor saw them like that. He squeezed my hand again. I think I was just lucky to be the first. We kept walking, the sand soft beneath us, and the ocean stretching out endlessly. I thought about how far we'd come, from strangers who barely exchanged a word to something that felt like home. Later that night, back at his apartment, we sat close on the couch, the city lights twinkling through the window behind us. Sam turned to me, his eyes reflecting that same quiet hope from before. "Where do you see us going?" he asked softly. I hesitated, then shrugged. "Honestly, I'm not sure. But I do know I want to figure it out with you. One day, one step at a time." He smiled and leaned in, brushing his lips against mine gently. It was the kind of kiss that promised patience, understanding, and something deeper than words. As I pulled back, still catching my breath, I realized I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Getting locked out of my robe might have been the most embarrassing moment I've ever had, but it also unlocked something incredible. And for once, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Robe or no robe, locked doors or open hearts. Because sometimes, the best things happen when you least expect them. Months slipped by, and with each one, the awkwardness that had once defined my relationship with Sam faded into something steady and real. We weren't perfect. There were still mornings I'd forget my keys again, and evenings when I got lost in my own head. But we figured things out together, like a pair of slightly mismatched puzzle pieces that somehow fit. One weekend, we took a walk through the neighborhood, the kind of slow, aimless wandering that felt like a ritual for us now. The trees were just starting to turn gold, and the air had that crisp edge that hinted at fall coming. We paused in front of my house, the same one where I'd stood in a robe that ridiculous morning. Sam nudged me gently. "Remember this spot?" I laughed. How could I forget? That whole locked out in a robe moment is pretty much my personal legend now. He smiled, the kind of smile that made my chest tighten in the best way. "You've come a long way since then," I nodded, feeling a quiet gratitude wash over me. "Yeah, and so have you." There was a comfortable silence between us, not the kind that's awkward, but the kind that means you don't need words to feel connected. Then Sam reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He handed it to me. When I opened it, I saw a simple sketch. 2 stick figures holding hands, standing in front of a house. Written beneath it was, "Our place someday? No robe required." I looked up at him, and his eyes were full of hope and something deeper, a quiet promise. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I want to figure it out with you, no matter what." My heart swelled. Me too. We stood there a little longer, hands intertwined, watching the neighborhood we'd come to love. That embarrassing morning, the locked door, the unexpected rescue, it all felt like the start of something far bigger than I ever imagined. Walking back inside, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. Sometimes, life throws you into awkward, even humiliating moments, but those moments can lead you to people who change everything for the better. And so, here I am, still a klutz, still locking myself out now and then, but with Sam by my side. The robe might be gone, but that day will always remind me how sometimes being vulnerable opens doors you never even knew were there.